How's that? How's that? Okay. All right. I think I've done enough attempts at DK to know basically a lot of this shit. This is all early game stuff. This is all before you can get on Roxanne. I'm gonna deafen real quick. All right. All right. Beautifly. Gets. I'm pretty sure it gets early Mega Drain or Giga Drain. Honestly, this thing's kind of shit. I don't think I've used this ever past Roxanne. Uh, it can be a cope, not even cope leap counter. Yeah, this thing just does nothing. This is kind of F tier. Beedrill actually can do stuff on Roxanne, but you can't get it before Roxanne unless you do starter clause. It's a Route 101 encounter. But if you do have that clause, this thing is pretty good for Roxanne. Can take 3 if you use Harden, but past this, I don't think it does anything. Just gets dunked on by Brawly. Yeah, I think this is like a very low D tier. It can save your Roxanne, but otherwise this thing's kind of shit. Weepinbell, this thing's really good. Gets chlorophyll, gets gunk. When it evolves into Victory Bell, you can scale for gunk shot, and it does crazy amounts of damage. It's good for Roxanne, can toxic the leap. It's good for Brawly if you need a cope Poliwrath counter. It's good for solid for Watson. Can do a lot in Flannery's gym with Weather Ball and Gunk Shot. It's basically just good for. It's really good in sun sections, and can be probably one of the more consistent answers to Maxie's Executor. So I think this is gonna get an A tier. Butterfree, I think this is on the same level. I don't think it. I don't get this that often. But from all of my testing, this thing's pretty shit. So I don't think it's coming out of the box after Roxanne once. So I'm just gonna put it in F tier. Cacnea, decent for early game. Falls off hard after Brawly. Can be a cope answer to the Jolteon. It resists all the moves. But this is like also like D tier. This thing's pretty shit. Carvana, super IV dependent. If you get a good one, it's pretty solid. But if you get a bad one, it sucks absolute shit and never comes out of the box, unless you're doing exactly a pivot on Psychic. That's what this thing does. So if you land a good one, it can do solid things. It can kill Maxie's Gengar, Maxie 2's Gengar if you get a good one, and can be and it can be good for Tate and Liza's gym. But outside of that, it's just so IV dependent. If you get shit IVs, this thing does nothing. So I'm gonna put in C tier for like if you get good IVs, then it does some things. Charmeleon does nothing until it evolves into Charizard, which then it pops off. It's probably one of the best Magma Hideout Pokemon. If you land good IVs, again, you can kill the Executor if you outspeed. It's just like a really solid Fire type Pokemon. You just really want a fast Fire type. I think these are all going to be like in the same category, except this has an Earthquake immunity, so I think this is going to be a higher A tier for me. Chimecho. I think Chimecho, it's bordering on I think it's a very high A tier. One of 4 Pokemon that can 1v1 Roxanne's Leap, which is really good. It destroys Brawly. It's okay for Watson. I brought it to Watson a couple times. But in which case then it just starts slowly falling off. And it probably doesn't come out of the box much after Flannery. But for the early game power it has, this is a very high A tier. Torchic is S tier. One of the other Pokemon that can 1v1 Leap. This thing is just good for the entire game. Good for can do stuff on Brawly. Can I don't think it can do anything on Watson though. Um, does really good in some sections. Is a max is a maxi one Houndoom counter. Pops off in Magma Hideout. Does some things in does it do some things in Windows, but probably not. Um, I didn't really have that far of a Blaziken run. But from everything that I've seen, and also if you get 29 speed neutral, it can chain the two most problematic mons on Steven in the Elite Four, which is crazy. It's just good for the entire game, so it's gonna get an S tier. Corphish can get shell armor, is a dark type. Probably one of the few. I just can't gather my thoughts right now. It's really, really good. If you get this for Brawly, it can counter one of the mons with Aerial Ace. It's good for the Brawly split because it evolves into a dark type by then. Can output some pretty solid damage. And it's good for Flannery's gym. Can counter the probably one of the very few safe answers to those two Slowbro and Slowkings and Flannery's gym. And it's just overall a really solid mon. Really good for Tate and Liza's gym as well. Yeah, this thing is going to get like a very high A tier. Cubone, if you get Thick Club on it, it does crazy damage. It evolves before Watson. But it falls off of a massive cliff after Watson. Dies to like everything. It just doesn't have enough defense. It's very slow. And even if you're letting the Thick Hub, you give up your item, which you probably just want. This is probably going to be like a very low C tier. In fact, it might even be D tier. I don't think it's D tier because it kind of provides some early game stuff for Watson split. Dunsparce, this thing is F tier. This thing does nothing. Can I say? Dustox can 1v1 can counter Watson's Ampharos. Pretty good for Brawly. I don't. It's okay for Roxanne. But after Watson, it falls off a cliff. But again, it has early game uses, so it's gonna land a pretty high C tier for me. Ekans, if it gets Intimidate, it's decent for Brawly, with like Intimidate pivoting, but otherwise it's pretty shit, low D tier. Farfetch'd, what do I have to say? Ampharos is really solid, being one of the only bulky electro types. You don't usually get this before Roxanne, but it doesn't really do anything for Roxanne, but after it evolves, it pops off. Can 1v1 Maxi 1's Crobat. Kills a lot. Gets Shockwave for Bright Powder Gyarados. Because it usually like lives one, and you can just fire back with a Shockwave. It's just like one of those like very solid Pokemon that gets used throughout the entire game. This is either a very high B or low A. I think it's because of its new niche of being like a bulky electro type. I'm going to give it like A. Golem, this is a very high A tier. Gets very bulky. One of the very few consistent answers to Registeel on Maxi. One of the better pivots on Brawly. And also can also do stuff on Roxanne with like toxic pivoting. And gets Rockhead. It's a 50-50 ability, but it gets Rockhead and Head Smash. Really good for Winona. Really good for Norman. Really good. Not really good for Flannery. Really good. It's just solid throughout the entire game. It probably falls off after Magma Hideout. Doesn't really do much after that, but with its value, I'm gonna put it like right here. Gloom is really solid early game. Really good early game. Really good on Roxanne, really good on Brawly, really good on Watson. Then it falls off a cliff so hard. But I don't really use this thing after. It does get used in Flannery's gym sometimes with Weather Ball, but otherwise I used it as my EXP dump. But I think with its early game power, I'll give it a B tier. I'll give it the first B tier of the run. Seeking, gets some stuff, gets Mega Horn for lulz, does some early game stuff, but it doesn't really do anything after it evolves. It can like do a chunk to the Ampharos and then get sacked, I guess. But overall, this is like it doesn't really do much. I'm gonna put in D tier. Grimer, if you get this early, it's actually like really good. Not only because it's pretty solid throughout the entire game, but also you don't have to waste your seafloor cavern encounter, and you can just have this as your explosion counter for Archie. Um, very, very specially bulky, can be used in the sun sections a lot. It can actually counter the victory bell on Keegan, which is a problem. I will say that it is a problem. Um, but overall, it's like really, really good. Probably one of the best boomers on Archie. And it can do stuff on Brawly. There's like a thing you can do with Leap where you can disable Ancient Power and just full wall it. But otherwise, yeah, it's pretty solid. It's like a high B tier. Grovalt S tier. Probably one of if not one of the best Pokemon in the game. By far the best early game encounter. Really good for Roxanne. Can kill like 3 on that fight. Really good for Brawly. Can Polyrock counter. Really good for Watson. You can do multiple things with it. You can kill the Lantern, or you can do like the Endeavor Quick Attack strat for the Jolteon. Good for Maxi. Can X Scissor the Alakazam. And on Flannery, you can Rock Slide the Charizard. Solid pivot for Winona. Destroys Weather Institute, especially if you do the Leaf Blade delay. Really good for Seafloor Cavern. Really good for Archie. Actually, does pop off in Magma Hideout. You would be surprised, but it does a lot in Magma Hideout. Pops off in Agua Hideout. Does a lot in Tate and Liza's gym because there's a lot of Rock Psychic types. And also it gets X Scissor. Yeah, and it can be brought to Elite Four with Roar strats. Overall, this is just like absolutely fantastic Pokemon. I wouldn't say it's by far the best starter, but it's definitely the best starter. Growlithe eventually evolves into Arcanine. Gets extreme speed and Morning Sun. It's not really good for the first 3 gyms, but when it evolves, it does pretty solid into Magma and Flannery gym. Can kill a few things. Getting access to Morning Sun and extreme speed, pretty nice coverage. Also gets Wild Charge. It's just again, it's like a fast fire type. But with its additional, but it's a little bit slower than you would want it to be for a fire type. I'm pretty sure it's like 90 speed. I'm pretty sure. Let me check. 95 speed. Okay, so it is faster than I thought. Okay. I would say it's better than Victory Bell. I don't know. I think Victory Bell has more niches, so I'll put it right here. Gulpin, good for early game, all the way up until Watson Split, and then it falls off a cliff, like most early game Pokemon. But it's really good for early game. It gets Encore, which you almost are never able to use. But post Roxanne, you could. Post Watson, you can't really use it that much. It's very solid for early game, much like Loom. Can do some stuff on Roxanne and Brawly. Can be used on Watson with Encore, I guess. I haven't used Gulpin that much, but it's definitely decent. I'll put it in B tier. Hoot can be it's decent for Brawly, and then it just does nothing else. Very high D. I'll give it low C because of it could 1v1 one Pokemon on Brawly. Hoppip, this thing sucks ass. Don't even want to speak about this Pokemon. Uh, Lumi's gets an S tier. Gets Encore, probably the best Encore mon in the game. With its above average bulk and speed. Gets good coverage with Seismic Toss, and it gets Wish, which is broken. So it can just like come in on the grass move, Encore, then Wish, and then go into another Pokemon. Like it, this thing destroys Brawly. The other Pokemon that can 1v1 Leap if you come in on the grass move, which most of the time you're able to. Good for Watson. You can Encore something in Hidden Power Grass and just like destroy it. Actually, like not a just complete cope Flannery Ring. Like it can Encore something in Hidden Power Grass and kill it. And it can even be brought to the Elite Four, although I'm pretty sure you need decent stats for it to be brought to Elite Four. But it's just good throughout the entire game. Yeah, Encore's that broken, so definitely an S tier. Kabuto, it's gonna get an A tier for me. It gets X Scissor, which is really good. The 50-50 ability sucks a little bit, but Swift Swim isn't even that bad. It could probably have some use cases. Can probably kill some Dugongs that are Swift Swim that it can't with Shell Armor. But Shell Armor is by far the better ability. Really good coverage. Can kill a lot of stubborn Pokemon. Yeah, just it's really good for Roxanne. Good for Brawly as a pivot. Good for. It's not really that good for Watson, but once it evolves, it does some pretty good stuff. Good for. It's not really that good for Flannery, but it's good for Norman. It's good for the entirety of Weather. It's good for Weather Institute. It's good for Winona Split, and it's good for Magma Hideout. It's good throughout the entire game. There's not really a point where you regret having Kabuto, so give it an A tier. Kadabra, I think it's like a 1%, but even then it doesn't do that much in the Brawly. It gets Psybeam, but it just gets dunked on by its physical moves. But once it becomes an Alakazam, if you're able to bring this past Brawly or get it later, it does quite a few things, but it just doesn't have the bulk you need. I can rarely switch it in. But it being a fast Psychic type with good coverage, it's going to land like a B tier for me. But the bulk on this is kind of a problem. But you can switch in on other stuff. Kirlia, once this evolves into Gardevoir, it's very good. But you definitely do not want to hit this before before Brawly, because it does literally nothing. Like, it just gets destroyed by everything. But once it becomes Gardevoir, you can either do Trace Strats, which is really cool, or you can synchronize a good nature on stuff. Good for Flannery, good for Weather Institute, good for Magma Hideout, good for basically the entire game. And if you land Trace, you can actually do a sweep on Maxi 2 that you do need to hit some stats. I don't think they're that ridiculous, but you do need Trace for it. I think it's for the Executor. You trace Chlorophyll and you just go crazy. Early game it hurts, but if you get it for Flannery Split, it's really, really strong throughout the entire game. It's probably stronger than Chimecho. Stronger than Golem? I would say so. Krabby evolves into Kingler, can get Shell Armor, really good attack. Gets Ancient Power, gets X Scissor, I believe, gets Mud Shot for speed control. It's good for Brawly. Yeah, you get this before Roxanne. It's good. Good for Roxanne. Good for Brawly. Trash for Watson. Trash for Flannery. Doesn't really do a lot on Norman. Good for basically Good for Weather Institute split. Um, but it's just like a really solid like water type with like shell armor that's really defensive. And that's always good to have. So I'll give it a low A. Nah, I'll give it a high B. It's not better than Cadaver though. This thing's pure trash. Don't want to talk about it. If you get Ludicolo for Flannery split, it goes absolutely crazy. One of the standard Elite Four brings. I never get this before Sutopolis, so I can't tell you that. But what it does during Sutopolis, during T4 Cavern, during the Elite Four, definitely warrants this in A tier. Definitely like the highest A tier so far. Love this. It's basically a charm spam until it dies on Brawly. High C tier. Actually, I'll give it a B. I'll give it a low B. Machop. You definitely do not want this, but if you get it and you have good stats, it can kill some crazy things. It can kill like Wailords with guts, which is crazy. But overall, it's probably the worst Doofer counter. But if you get it, it's not like it's the end of the world. And if you hit some good stats, it can kill a lot of good things. So I'll give it a low C. Magby, this thing absolutely sucks. It's a fast fire type, but it's not bulky enough. I'll give it high C just because it's a fast fire type. Macargo, I think this is a low S tier. This might be S tier. It's either at the top of A or low S. No, fuck it. I love Macargo. I'll give it an S tier. Really good for Roxanne. I think this is the last Pokemon that can fully 1v1 Roxanne's Elite, which is really good. It's good for Roxanne. Doesn't do much for Brawly or Watson, but Flannery split, it does really well. Kills Maxi 2's Crobat, which is a threat, which is a big threat. It's really good for all the fire sections. It's very, very solid throughout the entire game. Actually, I think now that I'm talking through it, it just kills a lot of like big niches, and it gets Recover, it gets Will-O-Wisp. But yeah, I think I'm gonna put this high A tier now that I think about it. Gyarados. Is this an S tier? I don't think so. It might be top of A. It only gets Bounce as a flying move, which is unfortunate. But with like physical normal moves like Double Edge and Return, it still does a lot of damage. Really good for literally the entire game. One feels like it's absolutely required for Brawly. Good for Watson for VA pivoting for Lantern. Good good for Flannery again for pivoting. Good for Norman. Good for Weather Institute. Good for Winona. Good throughout basically the entire game. It's definitely like a mainstay Pokemon. I would say it's not quite S, but I'll put it top of A. Makuhita evolves into Hariyama. Good for Roxanne. Can do some stuff on Brawly. Solid for Watson with Force Palm. Can 1v1 one of Watson's Pokemon. Solid. I don't think it does much on Flannery. It does a lot of stuff in Flannery Split, however. Good for very solid for Norman. Very solid for Weather Institute. Very solid for Magma Hideout. Kills a lot of big threats like Laprases because this has some of the highest attack in the game. This is just it's just all like very solid Pokemon. I'm gonna put this. Again, it just shows up throughout the entire game. I'm gonna put it right below. Meryl gets Charm. It's basically like Love This, but it can last a little bit longer with huge power. Gets some fun coverage like Superpower. Can be good. It can be a Mat 2 Wailord lead. I think it does more than these. I'll put it right here. Marsh Chomp. I'll put this at A. It's not fantastic anywhere, but it's not garbage anywhere either. You can bring it to Roxanne. You can bring it to Brawly. You can 1v1 one of Watson's Pokemon. On doesn't really do much on Flannery. It can be good for Flannery's gym. It's basically just Whiscash Plus. And also gets Mirror Coat, which is pretty cool. I think this is an A tier. I don't know where exactly in A tier though. I think I'll put it right here. Meowth can kill Persian, can kill Alakazam, but that's about it on Maxi 1. But that's all it does. So I'll give it high C. Not 2. Really good for Brawly. Can get synchronized, so you can sync a good nature on it. Solid for Watson Split. Good for Flannery. It does fall off a little bit after Flannery. But it's still pretty solid. I'll give it a B tier. I'll give it top of B. Nidorina, not really that great. Doesn't really do much in my experience, but I'll put it like C. Nidorino, most of the time, it's like a fast ground poison type. But if you roll like crazy stats, it can do a mini Flannery sweep with Head Smash, which is really cool. But most of the time, it's just like it's like a pretty solid like ground poison type. But it doesn't really. It feels like if you don't have the right stats, it just never kills anything. So I'll put it like low. Yeah, I'll put it low B. Numel, very unique typing, can 1v1 a lot of threatening Pokemon. It doesn't really do anything before Watson, but once it evolves, it can kill some crazy thing. Can do a lot of stuff. If you're ballsy enough to go for it, it can kill like 3 on Flannery with Intimidate pivoting with Gyarados. And really good for Magma Hideout. Learns Explosion. So it can boom on something on Maxi 2, for example. Like really good typing and does a lot of good niches. I think this is like high A tier. Put it right here. Honestly, I think Kabuto's a bit lower. I think Kabuto needs to be a bit lower. Like right there. Nuzleaf. 1v1's Lunatone, then does nothing. It gets Chlorophyll, but doesn't have the damage to support it. I'll give it like a low C tier. Oh, Ammonite, really, really, really good. I think most of the time this is better than Kabuto. Can more consistently take 2 on Roxanne. Good for Brawly on pivoting. Doesn't do much on Watson Split. Really good for the Sun sections, especially Magma Hideout. It does a lot of Magma Hideout. Good for Winona. Can be brought to the Elite Four with spikes, which is really interesting. So yeah, good throughout basically the entire game. I don't think there's ever a point where you don't want to have this. I think it's better than Golem, honestly. Onyx does nothing for Roxanne Split, then evolves into Steelix, does some things. Pretty solid Steel type. Good, pretty defensive. I'm gonna put it top of B tier. Vampy evolves into Donphan, and when you get if you get Battle Armor Donphan, holy crap, it's broken. Like it was actually disgusting what this thing killed. Very defensive. Killed like almost everything. It felt like can be a maxi Crobat answer. Kills almost everything in Norman Split. Pretty solid for Weather Institute. Can be a head smasher for Winona. Pretty solid for Magma Hideout. And again, it's just one of those Pokemon that hold up throughout the entire game. I think it's better than Numel. The 50-50 is a little bit rough, but Um, I'm gonna put Pichu and Pikachu in the same thing. Raichu is solid, pretty fast. If you delay Pikachu, you get Volt Tackle, which is very good. Um, overall, it's good, but it just doesn't have the damage output you want unless you delay. But if you delay, it's really good. But still, it's just very frail. I'm gonna put it top of B. Um, Pidgey. You don't get this before Roxanne unless you do 101. If you do, it's pretty good for Brawly, and then after Brawly, it just does nothing. Doesn't have that much offensive presence. Yeah, I think it's like bottom of C tier. Honestly, this might even be D tier. Yeah, I'm gonna put this D tier. Poliwrath is really good. Really solid. Very bulky. Gets Swift Swim. Uh, really good for really good for Flannery Split. Good for Norman. Doesn't do too much in Winona Split, but really good for Magma Hideout. Really good for Aqua Hideout. Really good for C4 Cavern. Really good for 8th Gym. Does a lot in the sections where you want it to. So I'm gonna give this. We'll give you like an A tier. I think it's like a mainstay Pokemon, which really wants me to put it like right here. Actually, I'll put. No, I'm not gonna put it above Golem. Rapidash, fast fire type. Gets some cool coverage like Drill Run and Mega Horn. Gets Morning Sun, I think, but it doesn't have the offensive presence you want from a fire type. So I think it's lower than most fire types, but it's definitely higher than Magmar. But having a reliable fire type, I'll put it right here. Mightyena does okay-ish. But after that, it's just doesn't really do anything, I would say. It does get Intimidate, which is cool. Again, I think this is the other Pokemon that you can't get unless you do 101 claws. But overall, it doesn't really do much. It doesn't have the attack. And not getting stab off of its high attack is just not getting stab unless it's that. Like, it's going off of its 70 base special attack, which just doesn't hit hard enough. Doesn't really do much. I think this is D tier. This might be even below Pidgey. Raticate's okay. Gets Guts, gets Facade. But it just doesn't have the damage output you want. And again, you rarely get this. But it can do decent damage. And I'm pretty sure it has fun coverage with like Shadow Ball and I think it gets Brick Break, right? It's solid, but I would say this is like low B tier. Rhyhorn. Voltron Rhydon is just basically Golem but worse, which is still pretty good. So I'll put it like right here. Actually, I'll put it top of A. I'll put it bottom A. I mean, this is basically Charizard without the Earthquake immunity, so it's slightly worse, but it's not that much worse because it's still a very fast fire type. So I'll put it right here. Psyduck. Doesn't really do much. Even when I had it, when it was Swift Swim. I think I had this like a couple times. Isn't this oh yeah, this is where you have to give up your charm encounter in Petalburg City, which is definitely not worth it. It doesn't really do much. I think this is like low D tier. This might even be F tier. Because you would have to like, yeah, I'll put a low D tier. Roselia, good for Roxanne, good for Brawly, good for Watson. Then it falls off a cliff hard. So yeah, early game GOAT, but falls off a cliff. I'll put it right here. Sandshrew, basically the same thing as Cubone, but slightly faster, slightly bulkier. But overall about the same. I'll put it right with him. Shelter, very, very good if you get it. If you get it post Brawly where you fish up 107, it's very good. Very, very, very good for 114 Gauntlet. Good for Tabitha. Doesn't do much in Flannery's Gym because it's special and it's dog shit. But really good for Norman Split. Good for Winona Split. Good for not great for Magma Hideout. Good for Tate. Good for Tate and Liza Split. Does some things in C4, not much though. Overall, very good at the things you want it to do. Very bulky. I'll give it like a mid A tier. Kind of feeling right here. Shroomish evolves into Breloom. Once it evolves into Breloom, it's really, really, really good. Not great for early game, but really good once it evolves. 130 base attack with early access to Sky Uppercut. Really good for Flannery Split. Can KO Blissies without a second thought. Good for Norman Split. Good for Weather Institute somewhat. It's not great for Magma Hideout, and then it just kind of falls off a cliff. But the things it does, it warrants itself a low A tier. I'll put it like right here. Sentret, complete garbage. Skitty, complete garbage. If you get the 1% slack off in Petalburg Woods, then slacking is absolutely fucking amazing. Like, this thing is broken. Really good throughout the entire game. I can't even list where it's all good. Really good for Elite 4. Can straight up kill the Latios on Elite 4, which is crazy. This is definitely S tier. I'm gonna put it above Chicken. Slowpoke. If you get the early Slowpoke, this. Oh hey Juicy, I'm doing a Emerald Kaizo early encounter tier list. If you get the Slowpoke in Petalburg City, then this thing is super broken. Required for Elite 4 basically. I would imagine it would pop off in Magma Hideout. I would imagine it would pop off in Flannery's Gym. And when I'm used to getting it, which is like after Aqua Hideout, it's just really good throughout the entire game. Damn near mandatory for any Elite 4. I'm going to put this at the very top. Snubbull evolves in Gramble, does stuff, but overall it's just not that great. Put it bottom of C tier. Spearow can Rage Sweep on Brawly, which is really good. Yeah, it can take like 4 Pokemon on Brawly. And if you're ballsy enough, it can actually take 6 if you go for another Rage Boost. So yeah, this thing is good for Brawly Split, good for and also just good, a solid flying type throughout the entire game. Doesn't do much in the mid to late game, but it does have a secret strategy on the Elite 4 where you can Rage Sweep Drake. Although it is pretty niche, but it can be done with a God Firo. But I think with its early game power, and also with its just solidness throughout the entire game, I think it warrants a low A tier. I think above these two guys. Might be above him. I'm going to put it above Ampharos, why not? Spoink. Just a decent psychic type. Can get access to Thick Fat. Pretty good for Flannery. Good for Brawly. Good for Brawly. Can do some things on Watson. Yeah. But it kind of falls off after Flannery, and I just don't really take this out of the box. So I'll give this like a low B. I'll put it above these guys. I'll put it like right here. I'll put it right here. Sunflora, absolutely fucking broken. Yeah. This thing is an easy S tier. Destroys the first 3 gyms. Basically is a golden ticket to mid game. Can do some really cool. Does fall off a cliff hard after Watson, but with the amount that this guy helps you in the early game, it's just so good. And also has some secret growth strats on certain gym leaders and can be brought to Elite Four. Yeah, this thing's S tier. Swinub, this thing's pretty garbage. If you get this in Resto Tunnel, you just kind of cry. It doesn't really do much. I'm gonna put this bottom of a D tier. Spinnerack, F tier. Talo, S tier. If you get this on 103, you're just sweeping through the entirety of mid game. Probably better than all these guys. Yeah, this thing's giga broken. Good for Brawley, Watson, Flannery, mid game. Good for Elite Four. Yeah, this thing's just like really good. If you get 103 Talo, just pray you get stuff for Roxanne. You can sack like 3 on Roxanne and still be completely fine with Talo. Volbeat, basically worse Illumize, gets Signal Beam, which is cool, gets Protect, which is pretty cool. Doesn't do much after that, though. I would say its peak is like up at Maxi, where you can cope kill the Clay Doll, I guess. But overall, it doesn't really do much. I'll put it top of C tier. Yeah, I'll put it top of C tier. Voltorb can evolve in. It's solid for the first 2 gyms. Can cope kill the Poliwrath if you're desperate. But it starts to pick up a little bit when it evolves and gets a lot of speed. Can boom basically anywhere you want, but overall it's just a fast electric type. Doesn't have the damage that you really want. So I would say this is just like its main use case is a fast boomer, and that's enough for me. I think its extra use case puts above Raichu, but it doesn't land enough in A tier. Togetic, complete garbage. Totodile, Shell Armor for Alligator is just insane. Really good for Magma Hideout. Really good for Space Center. Can like 1v5 Winona. I think. I'm pretty sure it's really good for Winona. Really good for Space Tag. Really good for brain sections. Again, really good for Magma Hideout. I would say if you get this as your early game encounter, you are sitting pretty high, because this also can be brought at Flannery's gym. Really good. I'm gonna put this high. I think I'm gonna put it like a mid A tier. Put it like right here. Don't have much left to go. Ninetales, fast fire type. Put it right by. It's basically the same thing as Palava. Blastoise gets Fake Out, gets Mirror Coat, has some cool utility. And it's a guaranteed encounter around 109 and can be duped out for Alligator. I would say it's like a very solid Pokemon, but doesn't do too much. I'll put it like here. Actually, I'll put it right here. This thing is garbage. Actually, if this is Whismur, then Explode's okay. I'll put it right by Snubbull. Wingull, complete and utter trash. Does nothing after Roxanne. Gets Swift Swim, which makes it even more useless. So I'll put it like right here. Yanma, good for Roxanne, then falls off a cliff. So I'll put this like low C tier. Put it like right here. Zigzagoon, pretty trash. 101 dude, but doesn't really do anything. Gets extreme speed, which is okay. Zubat, once you get Crobat, this thing's pretty solid. But you don't get it until super late. If you get it during Brawly Split, it's pretty solid for Brawly. Pretty good for Flannery Split. But it doesn't really have the offensive presence that you want. Pretty fast though. It's mainly just like a way to like mean look the Dusk. It's just like a way to mean look the Duskull. So it doesn't escape. I'll give this like a low B tier. Put it like over here. And that's my tier list. Yeah, let me know what you disagree with. I'll save this. There we go. All right, I'm back. Yeah. Apparently there's a lot of shitters in EK. I think one of the things that surprised me the most when I look back on it was just Crawdont not being good. It's really IV dependent. Oh wait, not Crawdont. I'm stupid. Sharpedo. Yeah, it's very, very IV dependent. Crawdont does get shell armor. But alright. Alright, I'm gonna mute.